All right, guys, we are back, and we are now talking about the state of the Big Ten. You had one more thought, though, you wanted to get to on Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL.
Yeah, because like the idea that fans or Ohio State fans especially are still pointing at this whole cheating thing and Michigan's going to get punished or whatever. I just want to say I found it interesting because there was reports early on in this Connor Stallions process that Jim Harbaugh wouldn't be able to find refuge in the NFL if he left, and I haven't heard a peep about that since this whole interview process started, since he's been hired for several days now. I haven't heard anything about it either. So like that, I think that was just bullshit from the beginning. And I honestly think it's fine that he should be able to find refuge in the NFL. Why should the NFL have any reason to suspend Jim Harbaugh for something stupid that happened in college? Like especially something that like they have no jurisdiction over. Everybody knows that the NCAA is a house of cards anyway, and they don't really rule with an iron fist whatsoever. It's all just BS. Like it made no sense to me that if he went to the NFL, they'd find a way to like back channel, oh, you're suspended for X amount of games because the NCAA said so. Like, no, I understand that people think like the NFL enjoys the fact that they have a free minor league system that feeds into them. So they're not going to do anything to ruffle those feathers. But guys, if they found out that they could put games on Saturdays during the fall and the peak of college football season, and it would be, if they really wanted to, they could compete with college football and it would still do numbers. Like they don't give a shit about anybody. I don't care what anybody says. That's the NFL. They just don't.
Very much a potty mouth in this show. That's three S's for you, young man. It's a Friday night. I'll let it slide, but easy up on that. What my ultimate goal is? I think it'd be the funniest troll move in history if Jim Harbaugh hired Connor Stallions as one of his scouts. I think it would be so funny because all the pious beat writers in college who, the Greg Doyles of the world, who cry tears and it's cheating, and they use heavy-handed language, and it's just a bunch of crap. I don't care about it. That's not why they won the national championship. I think it'd be friggin' hilarious. I almost fell to your level there with the potty mouth. I think it'd be funny as hell if Connor Stallions was one of the newest Chargers scouts this year.
If he was, how many NFL teams are double, triple checking him through security every time he comes? They're like, hey,
it's legal now.
Making sure. That's true. John Harbaugh did say that. Did you see that clip a couple weeks ago?
Yep.
They were like, oh yeah, they were talking about the weather in Kansas City. He was like, yeah, we got some scouts going to that game to video stuff, and he's like, which is legal, by the way, in the NFL. Oh, my God.
So this now leads us with what I think is a pretty interesting question. And we're going to get to the Sharon Moore stuff in a minute. But with Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL, is Ryan Day the best football coach in the Big Ten? And remember, this now includes UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon, just for what it's worth.
Man, yeah, it's a good. Bringing up the other coaches or the other teams that are joining is I think important. I don't know if I'm willing to say, I honestly think it might be Dan Lanning, if I'm being 100% honest. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason Bama wanted him. He, I think, is at the forefront of this movement that Ohio State is now sort of finally diving in the deep end with of the NIL stuff and trying to retain players through paying them, even though it was so frowned upon for so many years and not the way to do things, right? I think I honestly think it might be Dan Lanning. I'm trying to kind of go through them all in my head and think through who else would be up there. I think Ryan Day is up there.
How about this? How about I go through every coach and you just give me a yes or no with a little explanation on whether that coach is better than Ryan Day?
I'm already going to say no on James Franklin.
No. Don't you do that. Let me.
Okay.
All right. We're going to start at Illinois. Brett Bielema, better or worse than Ryan Day?
No. Worse.
That's not an answer. Yeah.
I'm sorry, worse.
No, that's not how questions work. Yeah, I would agree. All right. This one I actually think is fun. So simply because he had such success at the level he had. Curt Cignetti at Indiana.
I see where you're going with that. I'm not willing to say he's better than Ryan Day at this point, just because Ryan Day's resume speaks for itself. He's beaten all these other teams except Michigan the last couple of years. And I think he's done some nice things at Indiana, but I'm not willing to put him ahead of Ryan Day.
I think Cignetti's going to be fun at Indiana. I don't know he's going to win enough to do what everybody wants, to cause the kind of havoc that you could, but I think it's going to be fun. But I think Ryan Day's better, by the way. So that's 2-0 is what I was trying to say. Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. Is he a better coach?
Maybe a better defensive coach. I'll give him that. I mean,
I think we've reached a point where Kirk Ferentz is actually incredibly underrated. But there's no way he's not better than Ryan Day. No, Ryan has had more success in his 4 or 5 years than Kirk has in his
here's what I'll say.
Years.
Here's what I'll say. Kirk Ferentz is better at getting more out of less than what Ryan Day is. Like Ryan Day to this point, in the shadow of the born on third base comments from Jim Harbaugh from 7 years ago, he has had everything under the sun, all the resources, all the weaponry, all the great talent to do what he's done. And Kirk Ferentz just flat out hasn't. And he continues to find ways to win games he shouldn't and get his team to the Big Ten championship game somehow, some of the worst Big Ten championship games we've ever seen. But he finds a way to do it. So I'll give him credit for that.
You ready for a tough? So this is you're still going to say Ryan Day, but he actually has a case to be one of the more respected coaches in the Big Ten. Mike Locksley of Maryland.
I like Locksley. He's
won 23 games in 3 years. That's pretty impressive at Maryland.
Yeah. I think he feels like the right guy for that program. And he's given some teams some tests, Ohio State included, in recent years since he's been there. So yeah, I think he feels like the right fit for that program. I don't know if I'm one to say he's better than Ryan Day.
Jonathan Smith, the newly minted coach of Michigan State.
Jury's still out, I guess.
Yeah. Well, my big thing with that is,
where was he again?
He was at Oregon State.
That's right.
And so I think he's a nice coach, but I think it's going to be an uphill climb there at Michigan State.
Yeah, I completely, honestly, I have.
You forgot about him?
I forgot about him because Michigan State is just like not even registering in my mind at this point because they reached the lowest of lows, or after they put Hitler on their scoreboard this year, that I'm kind of like, they still exist, huh? They're still a school up there in
Germany will attest. It's tough to come back from Hitler. Yes. All right. It takes a long time to rebuild after that. PJ Fleck at Minnesota. Is Ryan Day a better coach?
Yeah, PJ's like one of those raw. Like I think that's the thing that Fleck does better than Ryan Day. He has like the raw stuff down. Like that video of Ryan Day kind of getting into the center of that circle and like riling the guys up, like it just looked so it just looked so like fake, and it just didn't, it was very cringy. But PJ Fleck, like him doing something like that, you'd feel like he's the row the boat guy, and he's out there with these team slogans and all this. So I think he does that maybe better than Ryan Day, but I don't think he's a better coach.
I think PJ Fleck's a knob. Moving on, Nebraska's Matt Rule. Is Ryan Day a better head coach?
So that's an interesting one because I do think Matt Rule is actually a really good coach, and we're gonna get a chance to see him with like a legitimate quarterback now, because. Yes. Raiola did go there. I know it was like between him and Georgia, and he ended up going there. That's why Kyle McCord didn't go there. So with a legitimate quarterback, I'm actually kind of nervous about them in the Big Ten in the next couple of years if Rule can really ramp up his recruiting and bring in some good guys around him. But I think Matt Rule is actually a good coach. You actually probably have a better read on Matt Rule even than I do, having covered him during his Carolina Panthers days. But I mean, the fact that he rose as quickly as he did from Baylor, got the job in the NFL, I think speaks to him as a coach in general.
I think Matt Rule's a tremendous program builder.
Yeah.
I think he had no place in the NFL. I root for him at Nebraska, but he's not better. He has not proven he's a better coach right now than Ryan Day is. He's a proven program builder. Yeah. He's not better than Ryan. He hasn't been in the playoffs. Like his team's success have come right before he jumped to another job. He peaked Temple right before heading off to Baylor. He peaked Baylor right before heading off for Carolina. So I think this Nebraska job will go a long way into proving he's either a great college coach or just a really good program builder that gets places. And then, he's a 5 to 7 year guy and then on to the next school. David Braun at Northwestern, that's a 1 year deal. That's tough to say. So we'll put him. James Franklin. Is James Franklin a better head coach?
Well, real
than Ryan
quick,
Day.
going back to Northwestern, what's interesting is if Pat Fitzgerald was still there, which we don't need to get into all that, but that would actually be closer than I think people realize. Pat Fitzgerald has always gotten a lot of praise from his players. And Justin Fields even talked about it. Like Justin Fields almost went to Northwestern because he wasn't highly recruited for a while coming out of high school. And Northwestern was like the one team that was kind of like looking at him. And so once he kind of got more names linked to him, it was over. But I think Pat Fitzgerald was actually really good. I
think Pat Fitzgerald is Kirk Ferentz in a purple smock.
I guess I'm starting to regret this because I have to realize that I have to come to terms with the fact that being a good head coach also means that you don't have going on in your program what was going on in your program. Yeah. And that wasn't great. So never mind. I take it all back.
It's probably a smart call by you. Good, quick retraction.
Erase that entire part of the section.
Don't run from it. Is James Franklin a better coach than Ryan Day?
No. Well, all you have to do is throw out the record against Ohio State and Michigan in big games. Like Ryan Day does what James Franklin does in like every big moment in like against Michigan. That's basically what it is. Like Ryan Day becomes James Franklin against Michigan, but James Franklin is James Franklin every single game. That's
you want to hear this? This is James Franklin's record at Penn State. 88-39. Can you believe that? Like that is not. No.
Somehow he was in the running for the Alabama job, though.
Hey, listen. Yeah, it's called his agent. Purdue's Ryan Walters. He's only had one season on the job in any capacity. That's not. Greg Schiano at Rutgers.
I think Greg Schiano is another one like Kirk Ferentz who is really good at getting a lot out of less, and I think he would be better. I think he's better than Ryan Day is. But I think overall, like from a schematic standpoint and all that, I would probably still lean Ryan Day.
All right. This one would have been really tough about a decade ago. Chip Kelly at UCLA.
Oh, shit.
There's a fourth shit.
These new teams. Well, and also I think wasn't there reports this week that Chip Kelly might get a look for an NFL gig?
I think that is exactly what it might be. But I think he'll stay. I think he's got one more year, but he's got to win big this next year. He's not. I'll just tell you, he's not.
He's not. But it is interesting because we know like what his offensive scheme used to be in the college level was like. He changed the game, right? It was like all this hurry up stuff, and it was a lot of the stuff that Nick Saban rallied against. He hated like the pick plays and that's pass interference, and then he sort of started to embrace it. But like he changed college football in a lot of ways in terms of the way the offenses were run. So it's crazy to think however long ago we would have thought differently about that. But yeah, right now I'm not willing to say that. No.
All right. Now is when, okay, I'm going to give you one more before we get to the tough ones. Jed Fish at Washington. No, it's not. No. Ryan Day's a better coach. Jed's had 3 years at Arizona.
If it was still Kalen DeBoer, I think it'd be worth debating.
I think it'd be a real conversation with Kalen DeBoer.
Agreed.
Hence why he got the Alabama gig.
Right. But I think we need to see more before we can say that.
All right. I don't know you, being the Ohio State homer you are ready for this one, but I'm going to give it to you.
I think I know where you're going, and I'm ready.
Luke Fickell, Wisconsin.
What's funny about this, and I sent you this the other night, is that Pete Thamel put out all the names of coaches that could be linked to the Michigan job, and I had to laugh at the mention of Luke Fickell on that list because, man, you talk about things that you like real trolling opportunities. Like Luke Fickell, if he actually had a chance to go to Michigan, like would he take that job just to get back at Ohio State for not giving him the job full time, however many years ago? And I mean, it's his alma mater. It always sounds like he has eyes on maybe getting back at some point, but that would be like the greatest pathway would just be like, I'm going to go to Michigan and beat them up. And then they're going to be like, hey, you actually want to come back and flip the script here a little bit? So I thought that would have been hilarious. I think Luke Fickell is a great coach. I think that he also is you have to be a good recruiter to do what he did at Cincinnati and bring in the players that he brought in. So I think he has a really good eye for talent, which is something that I think puts him on par with Ryan Day. I'd like to see at a bigger program him like Wisconsin, him continue to have success before I think I put him over Ryan Day. But I think like between him, Day, and Lanning, I think those three are kind of near the top for me, where it's wanting to see a little bit more from Fickell before I put him above those two guys. But I think like he's in the conversation.
I think this year is a big year for Luke. He's not Wisconsin born and bred, so the pressure on him is going to be. They were 7-6 last year. He's got to win 10 games this year to keep himself on solid footing. It's tough to be an outsider in a place like Wisconsin. All right, here the last two ones. One you've already mentioned, but I do want to get to. I think some people would put Lincoln Riley over Ryan Day. I disagree. Lincoln has had a lot of success. He has taken,
With quarterbacks.
What'd you say?
With quarterbacks in particular.
Yes. Well, but I mean, remember he was in the playoffs, I think twice with Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That's tough to do. I mean, even though it was at a time where Texas was taking a step back. What I will say is he has been an abject disappointment in Southern California. I still think he can coach, but like the bar has changed, and I just think like this is a dude that went 55-10 in 5 years at Oklahoma. He's already 19-8 in 2 years. He already has almost as many losses in 2 years at USC as he did at Oklahoma. I'll take Ryan Day over Lincoln Riley right now.
Did he make a mistake going to US, like leaving Oklahoma?
I mean, it got 10 years, $110 million. They bought his old house in Oklahoma, and they bought him a new house in California.
Okay, aside from a job standpoint, though, like did he because I wouldn't have thought like there's pressure at Oklahoma, but I feel like at USC they're in that same sort of territory that Texas was for a long time, where it was we think that this is the guy who's going to bring us back to prominence, right? And every year you think like, oh, USC's back. They just said they had Caleb Williams this past year coming off a Heisman season. This was supposed to be the year that they got everything back on track after Pete Carroll. And ever since Pete Carroll, they just haven't been the same. So I don't know. Like it seems like there's more pressure there. I would also think like maybe I would imagine he has more resources there because it's USC and LA and the glitz and glamour and all this stuff. But it just seems like other than the fact that he produces some of the best quarterbacks coming out of college every year that are top draft picks, I don't know if I feel like he's like, I think he's kind of fallen flat in terms of what the expectations were for him for sure.
You want a hot one? I think Ryan Day is who Lincoln Riley was through 4 years at Oklahoma. He's made the playoffs, but hasn't won a national championship. He's had some success against your biggest rival, but not consistent. And, Lincoln went 12-2, 12-2, 12-2, 9-2. And then that last season went 10-2. And that was, you could just feel, it's not that people at Oklahoma didn't like him, but you could just sense that the pressure was building to do something bigger than end up a 2-loss team. I think that Ryan Day is in about year 4 at Oklahoma he's where Lincoln was going into that last year, where after that 5th year, Lincoln said, I might want to go ahead and take the money and run. Everybody assumes that Ryan's going to get fired this next year if he doesn't beat Michigan. He might beat Michigan but lose in the playoffs, and that might grease the skids for him to kind of land another job to say, well, I beat Michigan, and now I'm going to go out like – I think Ryan Day is now on a Lincoln Riley trajectory, which is why this year is so important to get not just a win against Michigan, but a win, potentially a national championship win to just silence all the doubters. But I would still say I think Ryan is above Lincoln.
I think I agree. I do agree. Sorry, I just be more firm about it, I guess. I also like. Here's the other thing. I know I don't mean to just go back and use this as like the simple, I guess, explanation for why I think Ryan Day is a good coach. I don't want to simplify it down to just like one game necessarily, but I do look back and see what Ryan Day did in that Georgia game in the playoff last year. And that was one of the best games that Ryan Day's called in his career. And I just felt like he put up a better fight than I think we've seen Lincoln Riley teams do over the years. There was the one year they got boat raced by LSU. And I understand that LSU team, we all look back and say it might have been the greatest college football team ever. So I get that. He did put up a fight against in an Orange Bowl, I remember in 2018, it was like a 10-point game by the end against Bama, but even that, and then
Wasn't
he
that
went
the
to
Baker year? Or no, no, no.
yeah.
No, no, it was because 2018 is when Baker got drafted.
Yeah. And then 2017, they lost to Georgia in the Rose Bowl, and again, it went to double overtime, but that wasn't the same Georgia now. Like, I just want to know how he would do against some of these other top programs, and I think we kind of saw that this past year in the Pac-12. He got out coached by Kalen DeBoer and Washington. Boat race that maybe not boat race then, but I remember it was a high scoring game, and then they lost to Oregon. Like, I think that there's coaches who have proven that they've passed Lincoln Riley. I don't know that he is it's one of those he's not who we thought they were type things, because I agree with you. Like, here's what I think Ohio State fans think Ryan Day is at Ohio State right now.
So I do think that I'm going to save the Sharon Moore one till the Michigan Panic Meter, which will be in the next segment. But I do think with Dan Lanning, I think it's a conversation. The reason why I would still take Ryan Day over Dan Lanning is just the amount of success and the fact that
the resumes. Yeah.
Dan's been the head coach at Oregon for 2 years. I think he's going to make that one of the toughest teams to beat in the Big Ten. And I think Ohio State fans should start to fear Oregon because they're one of the few teams with the ponies to go up against you. That being said, he's 22-5 in 2 years. This was arguably his best team, and he lost to Washington twice. So I think Ryan, here's the reason why.
If he builds a legitimate defense, because that was always the knock in the Pac-12, right? Like, they didn't play defense, whatever. If he builds a legitimate defense, I think maybe that goes differently, and maybe we're having a conversation here. I think you have to do that in the Big Ten. Like, that's the difference. So we'll find out about that. If you were putting gun to my head today, if you asked me who would you rather have, I might actually say Dan Lanning, because I just think he's at the forefront of this movement and he really gets it. I think he'd buy into a lot of the history between Ohio State and Michigan and all these different things, maybe more so than Ryan Day has kind of done. So I might take Dan Lanning gun to my head right now, but that could also change, next week. So I think it's pretty close between those two.
I think you're crazy. I think you're absolutely right now, today. It could absolutely change this fall. But I think to say after everything Ryan's done, because you got to understand, it's not just about win-loss record. It's about recruiting. It's about putting guys into the NFL. It is about, being in a position to be in the playoffs, which Ryan has done half the time he's been a head coach. And albeit, he's been to one national title game and he lost that Georgia game as well. But he's had two of the four best teams in college football, 2 of the 4 years he's been the head coach. And I just think recruiting, top notch, putting dudes in the NFL, top notch, 3 quarterbacks, top 15 picks in 4 years, or 5 years. I don't know what more you could ask from Ryan Day other than just beat Michigan and win a national championship. And nobody else has the resume or recruiting or putting dudes in the NFL. Fickle doesn't have it yet. Dan Lanning doesn't have it yet. Hell, even Kalen DeBoer didn't have it yet. And I think Kalen's a freak of a coach. Lincoln's got some of that, but a lot of that was at Oklahoma. So I just think I think it's okay for Ohio State fans to realize with Jim Harbaugh going off to the NFL, I think Ryan Day is the toast of the town here, even if we still have questions about him.
I think that he should be. I definitely think going into next year, without Jim Harbaugh, with Jim Harbaugh out of the picture, he has to believe and he has to think and he has to prove that he should be the guy proving that he is the best coach in this league. 100%. He has no excuse anymore. He has this loaded roster for next year. If he loses to Dan Lanning next year, because I know Oregon's the one new team that's on the schedule for Ohio State next year, then yeah, maybe we're having a different conversation and we do change and we're changing the answer here. And maybe you're coming my direction more saying Dan Lanning. I don't know. But I think, yes, on paper, face value going into next year, there's no reason to believe that Ryan Day shouldn't be at that level and be the toast of the town, as you put it. I just I think that given how the last couple of years have gone, he's got to now sort of reaffirm that going into next year.
So with that, we did save one name. The name is Sharon Moore. He's the new head coach at Michigan. We're going to have that debate next. Is Sharon Moore, because he's beaten Ryan Day, does that make him the better head coach than Ryan Day? The Michigan Panic Meter, and we'll wrap it up But first, a word from our sponsors.